got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines. Inside the Hoosier Mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier Mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder fight. Inside the Hoosier Mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, sleuth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier Mind.
I had this wonderful intro and not a single one of it got heard. Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping giving veterans a voice. It is a wonderful, cool, crisp 70 degrees outside right now. It is fall here, at least in the Midwest, and it feels absolutely fantastic. And with it being fall, that means football is right around the corner. Now, I know Mike was with me last week, and we talked about week 0 in college football. Week 1 of college football is right around the corner this coming Saturday. And then the following week, we have the very first season of the NFL and the NFL football and whatnot. And Frankie in the comments, Bama versus Florida State this weekend, a whole new Alabama team. Excited to see. I know, I appreciate that, Frankie. I ended up catching it. If you're still able to hear me, let me know. I am excited for this Bama versus Florida State because it's kind of a real test season for Kalen DeBoer. Is he truly the guy behind Alabama's success right now, or is it still Nick Saban and he's just kind of being able to ride that? Now, we know Nick Saban is still a part of the administration team and has been helping with that, but is it truly Kalen DeBoer's team? What does it look like if Alabama struggles again this season and he potentially misses the playoffs? Don't know if it'll happen or not, but we'll see. But with all that being said, let's dive into a little bit of the NFL preseason news. There's going to be a ton of news breaks that happen with the NFL because it's preseason. All the rosters are trimming themselves down and whatnot. As you know, we come about into the first season, everybody's kind of fighting for roster spots and whatnot. But there's a couple different stories I wanted to talk about, though. One of them obviously being the bigger one with Shedeur, because everybody wants to talk about Shedeur. The other one is kind of the Saints, and I just wanted to cover this real quick because I felt like they were the most interesting, because at least up until this afternoon, they didn't have a starting quarterback name. They finally named Spencer Rattler as the starter, but at first they had drafted Tyler Shuck, which, come to find out, that's how you enunciate his name apparently. At first I thought it was Show or Schaff maybe, but apparently it's Shuck. They decided to pick Spencer Rattler as the starter. Now, to me, because they took so long, this kind of does a couple different things. It's a little bit of an indictment against Spencer Rattler. He's been there in the system, or at least there in the team, in the locker room and whatnot, for 2 seasons now. And albeit he's not in the same system. Meanwhile, this rookie that to me is kind of a reach, Tyler Shuck out of Louisville, comes in and they're like, we don't really have a definitive guy coming in as the starter for New Orleans. Not like I expect New Orleans to really do anything crazy, but it's a little bit of an indictment on Spencer Rattler because again, you've been in the NFL for longer than he has. You do have game experience because you had to fill in for Carr last year and the rotating, revolving door of quarterbacks that was down there in New Orleans. So you would think he'd have a little bit of the edge on the rookie that, again, to me is a little bit of a reach. But apparently it was just close enough of a battle. It took them all the way up until today before they finally decided who the week 1 starter is going to be, and it's going to be Spencer. So to me, that it's just weird. It's weird that they did that. And if it's really that bad, then in New Orleans is going to be in even more rough shape than what a lot of people are probably thinking. I know listening coming into work this morning, I think the over-under for them is like 4.5 winning games. And even some of the maybe games, 2 of them being both games against the Panthers, they really don't know what to do so far. So we'll see how that goes. But I thought that was kind of an interesting little first topic anyway to kind of break the ice with the show. The other one is Shedeur. And I know a lot of people have been kind of up and down with the whole Shedeur thing all off season, ever since he was drafted, ever since his draft stock fell and whatnot. And it was released today that apparently he is not going to be the backup. He's going to be the third string guy, and he'll dress in case of an emergency, but they are going to keep Shedeur. Joe Flacco is going to be the starter. Dylan Gabriel's the backup. Shedeur is the third string, and they traded Kenny Pickett to the Raiders. I'll say this for a couple different notes on that. And a lot of people may not agree with it, but this is kind of how I see it with Shedeur. I think given the opportunity to succeed, like he did that first preseason game against the Panthers, Shedeur played really well. Now, he played with slightly quality better guys when he was playing. The past couple preseason games that he has played, especially this most recent one, he was playing with third and fourth string guys that are just trying their absolute best to make the team as a whole. And Shedeur looked rough. He looked bad. He did not look like the guy that is going to potentially be a franchise quarterback if that's what everybody is seeing out of him and what they think he's going to be. When you put a guy into the fire like that, I don't know why people expect that, oh, he's good enough, he can overcome a dumpster fire that is something like Cleveland. And a lot of people are even upset that, well, you're not giving the starting job. He needs to at least be the backup. Again, why are you going to put the kid in a bad situation and just toss him to the wolves? And I say that mainly because it's Cleveland. Cleveland is a quarterback graveyard, as everybody's seen for the last few years. Almost every top 10 pick that they've gotten that's been a quarterback that they've thrown to the fire and started has ended up falling flat on his face, unfortunately. Not always that quarterback's fault. Cleveland doesn't always put a good supporting cast around him. And if you look at Baker was successful. They just didn't want to continue to put anything around him, even though Baker gave everything he could to Cleveland. So now when you look at Cleveland, they're going with the old vet in Joe Flacco. They've got a rookie as the backup in Dylan Gabriel that they took in the third round, which makes sense. He's got a lot of experience. He was in college for a long time. He's kind of already in a pro-ready system. And then you've got Shedeur, who he got consistently better throughout college. He was good at Jackson State. I've made the comparison. It's kind of like being a big fish in a little pond. Then he goes to Colorado. Now, albeit he and his dad both inherited a team that only won one game the year before. They had to completely gut the roster. They had to bring in a whole bunch of transfers. So guys that may or may not be able to make it work. And then the very following year, they're able to go 8-4 and at least have some type of success. So he got better as each thing progressed. Now with the NFL, there's the whole issues. Was it his attitude? Was it his off the field demeanor? Was it his on the field demeanor? Or was it primarily against his dad? I think it was more against his dad, and a little bit of the on the field stuff kind of sprinkled in there as kind of the topping of everything to be able to do it. But again, if you truly want him to be successful, don't have him start now. Let him sit. Let him just learn, because now you don't have any pressure on you. He can watch the game. He can see what he's doing. He can see if Joe makes a mistake, he's going to be able to do that. He can see if Dylan Gabriel makes a mistake, if Dylan has to fill in. And then if need be, then he can get his shot and be able to move in there. On top of that, Cleveland's wide receivers are not great. They just finally signed Isaiah Bond, great rookie that I thought was good at Alabama and Texas, ended up going undrafted. He had some off the field issues, ended up getting cleared of. Then Cleveland signed him, but he ended up signing late with the team. They have Jerry Jeudy, who hasn't really lived up to potential. And then other than that, it's a bunch of no-name guys that really haven't done much. And when I look at the roster, it's not really turning heads other than David Njoku, the tight end. Even at running back, I don't know what Cleveland's doing. They let Nick Chubb go. So realistically, what does Shador have to work with, even if he does get a starting shot for Cleveland? You're throwing him to the wolves and you're not giving him any type of a chance to succeed. I'm not saying he has to walk in somewhere like Kansas City or Minnesota or somewhere like that where he would have a better shot of starting, but don't say, oh, he needs the experience of basically getting his teeth kicked in by Cleveland, or some people would say, oh, he could be a starter on New Orleans. It's the same thing. You have one person. You'd have Chris Olave to throw to. You have an offensive line that's rebuilding. You have a running back by committee core back there that's not exactly great. I don't know where Alvin Kamara disappeared to. But other than that, he would not be set up for the most success. So for people who are freaking out about Shador being the third string guy, it's okay. I promise it's okay. It should work out. Hopefully it works out. Let him just take this time to learn. Let him take this time to sit, not have any of the pressure that a lot of these guys and a lot of these rookies are going to have to come in with. AKA, look at Anthony Richardson. When he first started, he came in as a rookie, thrown into the fire. Look at almost every Browns quarterback that came in, thrown into the fire. Honestly, even look at Trevor Lawrence for the Jags, thrown into the fire. So, and in a bad situation, equally similar to the Browns. So just giving time to really watch and learn the game overall, and I think Shador will be fine. MJ, technically the host of the World of Conscious and Positive Thinking, she is a massive Penn State fan. She's also excited for kickoff of college football this weekend, at least week 1. She's a Penn State fan with the "We Are" chants. And she's 100% correct when she said college football is life. That's what I'm most excited for, honestly, is the college football part. To me, college football is so fun because in the NFL, you can have the whole dynasty thing. You look at Kansas City. Kansas City's been like the last 7 or 8 straight AFC championships, and it's like it's cool, but I want a toss up. I want different teams in. I want different players to have a shot. Like I want variety. I want parity in professional football. Like that's part of the reason why I didn't like the Patriots for so long. It was like, yes, they were dominant for 20 years, but every single dang time is Patriots in the AFC Championship and they're going to Super Bowl. It's like every flipping time they were there. I want parity. I want something different. But college football, you have that. Now you didn't there for a minute because the whole Alabama. We're not going to talk about that because Alabama's on the down. I know I said a little earlier, I am excited for them versus Florida State. A little bit on the down, and that's okay because we're completely okay with that. But to talk about college football, we need to first talk about at least the big game that happened in week 0 this past weekend, this past Saturday in Dublin, Ireland, the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Number 22 Iowa State taking on number 17 Kansas State in a Big 12 matchup early on. In all honesty, what a lot of people think could potentially even be the Big 12 championship game come December if both teams are able to continue on successful paths. Now, obviously, the benefit of having a 12-team playoff is if you have a loss, it's not completely the end of the world, as well as all of them have pretty much an equal shot in the Big 12 to even compete for the Big 12 championship. To me, there's really no outlying front runner in the Big 12 as far as, oh man, this team is just light years above everybody else. Everybody kind of has their own issues. Iowa State has to replace some wide receivers that went to the NFL. Kansas State is kind of always up there, but they always get tripped up by a couple of games. Utah could potentially be good with a really good defense. Question those at quarterback. And I mean, there's question marks almost against every single team in the Big 12. And of course, Arizona State, I think, is the favorite. There was a really good point that Joel Klatt brought up a few weeks ago, though, about Arizona State, and that is the heart and soul of their team, Cam Skattebo, is now with the New York Giants, or at least he was for preseason. I don't know if he'll stay on the roster or not, but at least at the current moment, he's with the Giants, and it's hard to replace that heart and soul of your team. They are bringing back a veteran quarterback who's been with the system. He was absolutely solid last year. They gave Texas a run for their money. They gave Iowa State a run for their money. They won the conference the very first year they were in it, and it's hard to replace that with a hard-hitting running back that's kind of the heart and soul of your entire team. So I don't necessarily know if Arizona State's the quote-unquote favorite to win it. But again, I think the cool thing about the Big 12 is the amount of parity because of the fact that just about everybody is set up the same in the Big 12 and everybody has an equal shot. The Big 10, the SEC, it's going to be Ohio State, it's going to be Oregon, it's going to be Penn State, maybe even Michigan if Bryce Underwood can kind of get his feet underneath him. Nebraska might even be a dark horse kind of sleeping in the Big 10. For the SEC, what does Alabama look like? Georgia's retooled. Florida and DJ Lagway, if they're healthy. LSU on paper is supposed to be really good. We'll kind of see how they end up turning out. Texas is supposed to be the overall favorite in the SEC. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all goes. But the Big 12 to me is the most interesting just because you don't know who's going to win it. You don't know who's going to end up as the final two championship, at least contenders for the conference. MJ, you are right. Penn State did lose a lot of good talent to the NFL. One being Abdul Carter. Now, I've heard a lot of good things about Penn State's pass rush. I heard a lot of good things last year. I haven't heard as much this year, but they may just not have covered it as much this year as they did last year. I felt like last year they did. To me, still the biggest question for Penn State, though, is Drew Aller. I know he's been really good. I think he started almost every single game since his freshman year, and he's coming into, I think, his third season. And he's solid, but again, can he and James Franklin take that next step for Penn State? And honestly, can they get the boogeyman of Ohio State and or Michigan off of their backs finally, which they haven't been able to beat Ohio State in, I think, like 7 or 8 years. I think it was 2017 or 2018 last time they beat Ohio State. So we'll have to see how that goes. But real quick, just to wrap up the Iowa State versus Kansas State, though, that I did want to talk about. Both teams did have the benefit. They both had, returning quarterbacks that had been with the team for a hot minute. Rocco Becht coming into his third season. Avery Johnson, I believe, coming into his second or third as well. He might even be a senior. I'll have to look that up real quick. All in all, this was kind of a sloppy game all the way up until the fourth quarter. It wasn't very high scoring. It was a little bit rainy, so there's a few turnovers. Both teams had 2 fumbles each. So it ended up looking a lot uglier than what it was until the fourth quarter. And then I think both teams kind of started to settle in, get each other kind of felt out and whatnot. So Avery Johnson, also a junior, coming back. So both had experienced junior quarterbacks coming in to play. Avery Johnson, he played absolutely fantastic. I mean, 21 of 30. He had 273 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's only sacked once. No interceptions, no picks. So, I mean, he played about as cleanly as you could. To me, Iowa State struggled a little bit more in the passing game, but they were able to make that up with their running game. And that's no shot at Kansas State. Kansas State also had a phenomenal running game. As far as the running backs, the quarterbacks, everybody was able to move extremely well. It ended up being a lot better than I think, at least that I even expected, because I was watching it through the first 3 quarters. I'm like, man, it is just 7-7. They keep turning the ball over. Nobody's really moving. Nobody's really doing anything that is kind of worthwhile or quote unquote sexy. And it just wasn't happening. But I mean, Iowa State ended up being able to find a way to come out with the win. They were at 4th and 3, the big pass to the tight end to get the first down and ultimately sealed the game. I mean, it was a great startup for the season to be able to have that and to be able to roll with that and have it as honestly probably the best game of the weekend. I know some people would probably even argue the Stanford versus Hawaii game. That's a huge surprising upset, by the way, that of all things to happen, Hawaii beats a Power 4 team that realistically is also struggling. Stanford, with their first year as Andrew Luck as the GM, Frank Reich is the interim head coach. He knows he only has 1 year there, Stanford, to see if he can be able to get it done. And so far, he starts out with a road loss to Hawaii, of all teams, to start things out. But it was interesting nonetheless. Kansas was able to just absolutely roll Fresno State with no problem, 31-7. UNLV picks up a win against Idaho State. Western Kentucky gets a win against Sam Houston. And obviously Hawaii on the last second field goal ends up being able to get the win over Stanford and whatnot. So it was interesting to say the least that they ended up having that happen. We are going to take a real quick break, though. It might be a little bit of a shorter show today because it's just me. I don't want to go too deep in some of the boring stuff and whatnot. But in the second half of the show, we are going to talk about some of the predictions and whatnot for what I think is going to happen this coming weekend. I'll probably highlight most of the more interesting games and cool games and whatnot. But nonetheless, we will do that when we come back, as soon as I can find a video that I want to play. We'll roll with this. You can't spell hero without her.
Signed up to fight for freedom. What a price you had to pay. Picture in a helmet, missing family every day. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane. Some scars we'll never see. She will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter. She's a sister and a friend. Standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. On that old dusty base with the meadows that shine, she's been to hell and back for the stars and the stripes. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane, and some scars we'll never see, and she will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend, standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. Yeah, yes. For the ones that didn't make it, we will pause and then we cry. We can still see their smile in every sunrise. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend, standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. Big shout out to Coffee Anderson for his song, You Can't Spell Hero Without Her, and allowing MBR to be able to use his song and whatnot that he came out with. We are back to talk about season 4 of Inside the Hoosier Mind. I know I never talk about the new seasons. I always just kind of put it out on Spotify that it's a new season. But considering the fact that it's officially week 1 of college football and we have the NFL season right around the corner, I always like to kind of start a new season with that. The good news with this season is because I'm not traveling for work as much anymore, I'll actually be here to be more consistent with shows and whatnot, and I'll have content to actually talk about. So hopefully if you enjoy listening, you enjoy hearing all the corniness and whatnot that I have, and any guests that I have brought on, myself, Mike, anybody, you'll be able to hear a lot more of us, and you'll be able to see us a lot more consistently, since I'll actually be home and be able to, do this more frequently. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this coming season to be able to be home, and be able to watch just about as much football as I absolutely want to. But nonetheless, since we're in week 1 officially, it starts on Thursday. Figured I'd talk about and highlight some of the big games that are going to be coming up, that I think are going to be the most interesting that comes out. We don't have a whole lot of really big matchups, as far as conference versus conference wise. A lot of just the typical group of 5 schools getting beat up by Power 4 schools. We do have a couple interesting matchups, though. Probably for Thursday night, the absolute best matchup that's coming: Nebraska at Cincinnati. Big 10 versus Big 12. Nebraska's favored by 6.5. I really expect Nebraska to take a big step forward. Dylan Raiola now, his second season with Nebraska, or it might even be his third. Actually, I'm gonna have to double check that just to be sure. But coming into another season with Nebraska, another year under Matt Rule's system and whatnot, I'm really excited to see can Nebraska take another step forward. He is a sophomore, so he's coming into his second season now with Nebraska. Dylan Raiola is. So another year under Matt Rule's system. They did actually a lot better last year than people thought. I know they ended up getting beat pretty badly by the soon-to-be champions Ohio State. But overall, it is a massive improvement than what Nebraska has been ever since they've joined the Big Ten, and they've just honestly fallen to the wayside. So I'm interested to see how they perform. Cincinnati's defense apparently is supposed to actually be pretty good this year with a lot of returning starters and whatnot to the field. Now, the benefit apparently is this game is going to be taking place in Kansas City, Missouri. Really don't know why that's going to be taking place in Kansas City. It's a little weird at Arrowhead Stadium, but it is what it is. Oh, well. So Nebraska will probably have home field advantage, even though they're going to be considered the away team. Still be kind of interesting to see. Friday night, though, we do have a couple interesting matchups because you've got Auburn at Baylor. Auburn is favored by 2.5. Both are. I don't really know what to expect at Auburn with Jackson Arnold at quarterback. I know Cam Coleman's going to be absolutely solid. Baylor is supposed to potentially be maybe a dark horse in the Big 12 to potentially win and go for the title and whatnot. So it'll be interesting to see if that ends up coming to fruition or not. So, I mean, I don't even know who I'd really pick in this. I might pick Baylor just pick the quote unquote upset just because of the continuity Baylor has. And I know with Auburn and Hugh Freeze, he's going to be one of those coaches we're going to have to watch all season as far as being on the hot seat. So, with a new quarterback in the system and whatnot, we'll have to see how that goes. It's also a home game for Baylor, so we'll see how it comes to fruition. The other big one, again, kind of an interesting thing that I want to see what happens. We have Georgia Tech at Colorado. So, first year without Shador, first year without Travis, first year without Shiloh, all for Deion Sanders. Kendon Slater is supposed to be the starting quarterback for them. It'll be interesting to see what does Colorado look like now without his sons, and what does Deion look like as a head coach without his sons. He did have the benefit of Shiloh, Shador, and his adopted son, basically with Travis Hunter. What does Colorado look like? Is he truly going to be the guy that can lead the Buffaloes into the future and keep them in a relevant argument as far as being able to compete in the Big 12? And same for Georgia Tech. They started out the year, they were able to upset Florida State over in Dublin when they were technically ranked number 10th in the country. And as it stands right now, even being on the road, Georgia Tech is favored by 4.5. I might take Georgia Tech just because they have their starting quarterback coming back. They have a lot of returning starters and a lot of experience, as well as their head coach just finds a way to win against good teams. So, not saying Colorado is going to be, extremely great, but again, they should be a little bit better. They have the talent. Deion can recruit, if anything. Can they put it all together? And what does he look like without his kids being there? That's the real question for the Buffaloes. And then obviously Saturday, the big day, we've got so many great matchups on this. You got Texas at Ohio State. Now, it's funny, this keeps flipping back and forth. Ohio State is considered the favorites by 2.5. I've seen a couple where Texas are the favorites. Texas, Archmania is finally here. We're going to see what he looks like against, an Ohio State team that, has continued to, I'm not going to say rebuild, but reload on that defensive front. The defense is still supposed to be solid, but we'll see what that looks like under Matt Patricia. Now that Jim Knowles went to Penn State. What does Ohio State look like on offense with Julian Sayin? Now that Will Howard left, you still have Jeremiah Smith there. You still have Carnell Tate. They still have a lot of talent, but you don't have Emeka Ibuka, who's really been the security blanket for a lot of these guys. but you still have probably one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the country, Jeremiah Smith, to throw to. So what does Julian Sand look like? We see what Arch looks like. Arch has some experience, and Arch won his games, and he's been able to fill in. But what does he look like in a hostile environment going up to the shoe with Ohio State fans? They're going to be rowdy, and they're going to be excited on the fact that they won a national title. And really, to me, Ohio State's biggest goal this year so far is more than likely to beat Michigan for hopefully the first time in 4 years, but we'll see. The other big one that, again, probably not as sexy of a matchup, but it's Battle of Orange. You have the Syracuse Orange against Tennessee. In Atlanta, Tennessee's actually favored by 13.5. And this one has a lot of question marks to me, because what do they do without Nico Iomalava? I hope I said that right. If not, I 100% apologize. Without Nico, because he went to UCLA. Now, obviously, they got the quarterback that was at UCLA. They all but just basically did a quarterback swap. What does this Tennessee offense look like? It's supposed to be quarterback friendly. They're supposed to have a lot of senior returning offenses. They're supposed to have one of the best defenses in the country, especially in the secondary, if they're able to stay healthy. But nonetheless, though, that'll be Tennessee is one that we might have to keep our eye on. I know a lot of people actually have them only winning about 7 to maybe 8 games. But my biggest thing is, what do they look like post Nico? Now, I know he was only there for a year. He was a freshman. He actually stumbled a little bit. I don't think he and Josh Heupel fit really well together. We'll have to see if the new quarterback potentially, makes things maybe a little bit easier on everybody in place of that. One of the other big matchups that Frankie brought up a little bit earlier, Alabama travels to Florida State. Alabama is a 13.5 point favorite over the Seminoles. How does Florida State rebound? They had a disaster of a season. DJ Uyunglele was the quarterback. He ended up getting drafted. Florida State has now completely moved on. They have the kid that came from Boston College, who has been talking a lot of smack on social media. And if there's anything we know about Alabama, they're very quick to make you regret doing that. But Florida State's coming back into Doak Campbell Stadium. It's been renovated, so they maybe lost a little bit of seats, but they've tried to update it and tried to renovate it a little bit to make it better. But what does Florida State look like? And, what does, Coach Norvell do with Florida State? And is he potentially on the hot seat? Because honestly, before Jordan Travis, he was not really killing it there in Florida State. He gets a good quarterback. They go on a really good run. They were able to beat a lot of SEC teams. They went undefeated all that year until he got hurt. And then obviously we saw what happened with them in Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see how Florida State is able to rebound if they can. I don't think they beat Alabama. I think that's a pretty significant loss for them. But the biggest question is, does Florida State even look competitive? Do they at least look like, once they get into a game that's not Alabama, whether they get into ACC play or even a non-SEC team, or just at a conference game, what does that look like post Alabama to face a team, and do they at least look competitive as they do it? But we'll see. After that, there's really not a really whole lot of other sexy matchups. The big one that I'm a little biased about, my LSU Tigers go to Clemson in Death Valley to take on the Clemson Tigers. Clemson is currently at the moment favored by 3.5. Tigers versus Tigers. This is going to be a big game, not just because of the name, the talent, but you've got Cade Klubnik, who's a potential Heisman candidate, against Garrett Nussmeier, who's also a potential Heisman candidate. On paper, both teams are supposed to be absolutely fantastic. Clemson is bringing back a lot of starters with a lot of experience, who they eventually ended up catching steam last year, kind of getting on a roll. They won the ACC championship, gave Texas just about everything that they could handle. They did not make that game for them against in the playoffs easy. And Dabo Swinney has kind of really stuck to his guns. I gave Dabo a lot of grief last year as far as his reluctancy to utilize the portal, and kind of he's very prideful, and as a result, I think sometimes it hurts him when it comes to recruiting. But I mean, he's been able to show otherwise, as far as no, I'm going to continue to do things that we have been at Clemson. We're going to use the money. We're going to recruit our own guys. We're going to keep homegrown guys, and we're going to see how they do. LSU actually took the other approach with Brian Kelly. They brought a lot of guys in from the transfer portal. They brought a wide receiver in from Oklahoma. They spent a ton of money on the defensive side to help fix the secondary, to help fix that defense, hopefully get a better pass rush. The defense has consistently gotten better from what it has been. It was still a little bit rough, but Harold Perkins is back on the defense, which is huge if they're able to keep him healthy and keep him in the pass rush. Harold Perkins is going to be an absolute monster for the Tigers, as well as they have a 6'5" freshman corner in DJ Pickett. We'll have to see how he ends up being able to perform throughout the season and if he's able to live up to the hype and hopefully if they're able to use him correctly. But this is a bigger game for Brian Kelly because LSU has not won an opening game since the year that they went undefeated and won the national title in 2019. They are now 0-5 ever since. In opening games, they lost one to UCLA, they lost 2 to Florida State, they lost last year to USC, and then they opened this year against Clemson, and then they opened next year against Clemson. But what does it look like if Brian Kelly doesn't? I think I think his seat's already a little warm. I think if he loses, it turns up pretty significantly. And then after that, depending on how he does with the season, if he's able to at least be competitive in the SEC, get to the SEC championship, and maybe even get into the playoffs, I think it saves his job for another year. If not, I think this might be the last year for Brian Kelly. Some people may say that's crazy. Look at what he's done, et cetera, et cetera. I say the same argument for Brian Kelly and LSU fans and the LSU alumni and all of those boosters and whatnot that I did for Ohio State. Yes, you lost against Michigan, but you still had one of the best records in the country. Your only other loss was to Oregon, who you ended up blowing out in the playoffs and whatnot. So it ends up working out. And I know a lot of people wanted Ryan Day to be fired as a result of that. But if Brian Kelly does not deliver this first week against Clemson, I think he's definitely going to be out of a job and he's going to get booted, depending on how he does the rest of the season. As far as any other big matchups, I mean, if you want to get technical with Power 4 versus Power 4, you have California versus Oregon State at Oregon State. They're favored by 2. Again, not the sexiest matchup, but a little bit of quote unquote Pac-12 after dark because it starts at 10:30 p.m. Oregon State's favored by 2. Cal is just a mess. I don't expect that to be, anything too crazy. Even if there's an upset, I don't think anybody's really going to care much. Probably the other big matchup that I think is interesting just to see kind of how it does is Utah versus UCLA. Utah on a bounce back season. Like I said, defense is supposed to be really good. There's a little bit of questions at quarterback. The offensive coordinator for UNLV comes in, brings the quarterback that he had with him back. And how does Utah look post Cam Rising? Because they've had a lot of talented teams. They've just been riddled by injuries. They've more specifically been riddled by injuries at the quarterback. Cam Rising got hurt quite a bit. Isaiah Wilson, Zach Wilson's brother, filled in, was not good for them last year. And then UCLA, what does Nico look like in his first game? First game, it's at home at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. How does he look with a new team and a new system? When honestly, he went there really late in the season in the spring game, in the spring. He didn't really get a chance to play with them the spring game. I don't know how much, continuity and how much chemistry he's been able to build with the team so far, but it'll be interesting to see how he's able to rebound from that. And how does he rebound against a team like Utah, who has an experienced defense coming back? Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in the country coming back. There's some rumors that it might potentially be his last year of coaching. We don't know how that's going to be, but nonetheless, though, I think it's one of the kind of slept on games that some people may be able to watch. It starts at 11 p.m. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be awake watching it, but I will 100% try if I'm able to watch it and just see how it goes. And this is just the Saturday matchup. Those are all the games on Saturday. We actually have 3 games left on Sunday and Monday. Sunday, you have Virginia Tech going to South Carolina, but it's going to be hosted technically in Atlanta, so it is a neutral site for both teams. South Carolina is favored by 8. Again, Lenora Sellers in his second season. You have Nick Harper there as well. South Carolina kind of snubbed last year to a lot of people's arguments as far as making it into the college football playoffs. They did have 3 losses, albeit quote unquote legitimate losses. Still 3 losses, and a lot of people argued they should have been in. Maybe they make a run for it. We'll never know. But they start out taking on a Virginia Tech team who may have a little bit of fire under them as well. But with it being that close to Atlanta, that being close to South Carolina, and just the overall talent that South Carolina has, I kind of expect them to just pick up where they left off last year and be able to roll them. The other game that to me is probably the most interesting and I'm excited to watch on Sunday, you have number 6 Notre Dame traveling to Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami to take on the number 10 Miami Hurricanes. Notre Dame is only favored by 2.5, which that makes me have a lot of questions. Not denying that Marcus Freeman isn't a great coach. He just took his team to the national championship. Notre Dame lost some folks to the draft and whatnot. They have a new quarterback in CJ Carr, who's a freshman coming in. You know, Marcus Freeman already said that he has total confidence in him to be able to start. You know, what does he look like with the team? As well as on the other side with Miami. Now you have Carson Beck. Carson Beck is supposed to fill in the shoes of Cam Ward. Now, I actually had a couple people on TikTok get quite salty at me because I said that to me, Carson Beck is not exactly an upgrade. I don't think he's bad. I think he got the opportunity to sit behind Stetson Bennett for a while. He got to learn. He won a couple of national titles being a backup quarterback. But now, even when he was with Georgia, he was a starter for 2 seasons. They won the SEC, which, you know, hats off to them, more power to them for being able to win the SEC. But then what does it look like now as he goes to Miami? What does it look like as he comes in? And can he lead Miami to being a legitimate contender and whatnot? Especially after you had such a dynamic quarterback in Cam Ward, who was super athletic. He was, I'm going to say, a little bit nonchalant and kind of lackadaisical in the pocket, because I don't know if anybody ever watched the Miami games last year. I'm not saying he has to scramble. He has to, you know, be dancing around, making all the cutesy moves and whatnot. But it was crazy at how I would watch him. These defenders are just rushing him. He's just kind of sitting there hanging out. I don't know if Carson Beck is going to be able to replicate that same thing. But there's been a lot of people argue that the system is supposed to be a lot more quarterback friendly. It's supposed to be an easier offense for him to be able to run. And they think with just the overall talent and whatnot, it'll be a completely different story. I think it's possible. I think Beck could. But from what we've seen at Georgia, the talent that he had, the defense that he had, I don't know if he'll be able to replicate that in Miami, but he does have the benefit of it being in the ACC. Nonetheless, Notre Dame versus Miami, it's a huge classic as far as, you know, the matchup goes. Like I said, Notre Dame's favored by 2.5. I'll take Notre Dame just because the experience. Last year, one of the things I watched Miami do that was really hurting them, they would have a lead and then they would give that lead away, and they would have teams start to fight back, and they were really struggling with being able to keep that lead. And I don't know if they'll be able to replicate that again to be able to have that same type of success, but we will 100% see how that goes Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. on ABC. And then, of course, the final matchup technically before the NFL season starts and the finish of week 1 for college football, TCU goes to North Carolina to take on Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels. This one to me is so interesting because what does a Bill Belichick college team coach look like? You know, is it a team that can make a potential run in the ACC? Overall, schedule-wise, they have a very favorable schedule. You know, they have to get past TCU. Their next hardest game is against Clemson, which is in about 4 weeks. Then they have a bye week. And then after that, you know, they kind of have smooth sailing all the way up until the end of the season. I'm not going to say that they're going to do something crazy and go like 11-1 in the ACC, but I think it's realistic. They could win 9 to 10 games and maybe be in that ACC championship contention. I know Clemson is still a potential favorite to go to that. I know SMU will potentially be, Miami will potentially be. And some of the benefit is not all these big powerhouse ACC teams face each other. That's the other benefit that some of these teams have, and that's what North Carolina has currently. They also get the benefit of a TCU team that I think is still really rebuilding post-national championship, where they not only lost a lot of guys to the draft, but then they lost a lot of guys to transfer portal. It's another season removed, so you have another round of guys getting drafted, guys moving on and whatnot. So what does the Sonny Dykes team look like going into Chapel Hill? The other benefit for North Carolina, You don't know what Bill Belichick's running. He's even admitted that he likes the fact that nobody knows what he's going to be able to run with in North Carolina because, hey, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What does it look like? And Yoel, I appreciate that look at the beard. I know I shaved it down actually back in May. I wasn't completely clean shaven, but it was pretty short. And this is a few months of growth. I'm trying to grow it back out a little bit longer, but I'm trying not to look as homeless anyway. But yeah, I am super excited, everyone. Super excited for season 4. Super excited for week 1 of college football. And then, of course, right around the corner after that is week 1 of the NFL. Super excited for that. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate everybody watching. If you liked everything that you saw, if you liked and you want to continue the conversation, I'm going to have clips and whatnot posted up on TikTok. You can interact with me there. You can interact with me here on Facebook, YouTube, wherever you want to get social media at. Almost all of it is at Inside the Hoosier Mind. Except for X, it's at IN Hoosier Mind. And then, of course, if you like everything that MBR has, we have a ton of great podcast hosts and whatnot here at the Military Broadcast Radio that talk about anything from life to finances. We have other sports podcasters. All of them are absolutely fantastic. There's a little QR code right above here on the visual side, or you can go to mbradio.us to learn more about the great hosts and whatnot that we have here on the network. And appreciate everybody tuning in. I will be back next week. We'll talk all about the end results of week 1. And we'll talk all about the previews for the NFL as far as first game of the season and what we think the first week of the NFL is going to look like too. And honestly, even the second week of college football. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Everybody have a great night, and we will see y'all next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us, giving our veterans a voice.